I moved into Lakewood Gables during a soft, hazy dawn. The condominium complex looked serene beneath the faint glow of streetlights, manicured lawns, symmetrical hedges, and a row of identical buildings wrapping around a communal courtyard. My new unit, number 502 in Building C, promised fresh paint, quiet neighbors, and a picturesque view of the lake beyond the property line. Little did I know how quickly I'd find myself tangled in a bizarre HOA conflict orchestrated by its domineering chairwoman, known among residents as Karen. On move-in day, I was greeted in passing by a few mild-mannered neighbors, a friendly older man who offered a wave, a young mother with a toddler, and a teenager on a skateboard. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The building's front foyer gleamed with polished tile floors, potted plants, and a notice board filled with typical announcements. Local tutoring offers, housekeeping services, and the next HOA meeting date. I barely glanced at them, thinking it would be the usual homeowner's business that rarely affected me. But nestled among those notices was a large, color-printed flyer that read, "Reminder, the Lakewood Gables Homeowners Association enforces strict safety policies. See page 12 of your HOA rulebook." H. Barnett, Chair. I thought little of it until a neighbor whispered conspiratorially, "Hope you're ready." Ms. Barnett, everyone calls her Karen, can be intense. They gave a wry smile and slipped away, leaving me puzzled. How intense could an HOA chair be? I'd soon discover the answer. It was about a week after settling in on a muggy Wednesday evening when I had my first run-in with Henrietta Barnett. I was returning home with a bag of groceries, rummaging in my pocket for my key, when I noticed a woman in her mid-50s marching down the hallway with impeccable posture. She wore a crisp blouse, pressed slacks, and carried a ring-bound notebook. Spotting me, she paused. "You must be the new resident in 502, she said, voice clipped yet polite. "I'm Henrietta Barnett, but I'm called Ms. Barnett, or, as some folks say, Karen, though I don't prefer it. I serve as the HOA chairperson for Lakewood Gables." She extended a meticulously manicured hand. Hesitantly, I shook it, offering my name in return. Up close, I noticed her sharp gaze, like she was sizing me up. "I trust you've read through our guidelines?" she asked. "We maintain the highest standards around here: security, cleanliness, uniform appearances." I nodded, forcing a polite smile. "Yes, I've glanced through the rulebook. Everything seems in order." She gave a curt nod. "Good. We just ask that you comply with all policies, especially those concerning safety. Lakewood Gables is known for being one of the safest complexes in the county, thanks to strict measures." Something about her tone set me on edge, overly self-assured, almost condescending. But I shrugged it off. Everyone had their quirks, right? I thanked her and stepped into my unit, groceries in tow. Little did I realize that safety would soon become Ms. Barnett's, Karen's, excuse to pry into everyone's private lives, culminating in an outrageous plan to install cameras aimed directly at our windows. Lakewood Gables was quiet for a while. I spent my early mornings enjoying coffee on my small balcony, admiring the lake's gentle ripples. The courtyard below often saw children playing or older residents tending flower beds. Occasionally, I'd see Ms. Barnett, Karen, roaming with her notebook, stopping to inspect something or place a note on someone's door. Neighbors told me she had a history of pushing security projects, insisting we lock the communal laundry room at 8 p.m., demanding a log of all visitors parked in the guest lot, and requiring bright LED lights installed around the perimeter. Some found it comforting, others found it intrusive. Then I noticed new flyers popping up. "Attention residents. The HOA is considering enhancements to our security camera system. We may expand coverage to ensure all vantage points are monitored. Details forthcoming." At Barnett, Huachaya. At first, that seemed reasonable enough. Many condo complexes have cameras in lobbies, garages, and hallways for legitimate security. But all vantage points felt broad. Did she mean every corridor, the parking lot, or something more invasive? I shrugged, telling myself the board would keep it balanced. But rumors among neighbors hinted that Ms. Barnett wanted cameras everywhere, around the lake perimeter, the courtyards, even near balconies. "She acts like we live in a high-security compound," one resident joked. Another expressed worry that Karen might set cameras near windows. I laughed off the idea as paranoid. Who would put cameras pointed at private windows? That would be insane. I had no idea how close that rumor was to the truth. The monthly HOA meeting arrived on a breezy Thursday night. Curious about the rumored camera expansion, I decided to attend, thinking it'd be good to stay informed. The meeting took place in the community lounge, a modest room with folding chairs and a lectern at the front. Ms. Barnett sat center stage, flanked by two other board members who seemed overshadowed by her presence. After covering minor agenda items, landscaping budgets, pool hours, and so forth, Ms. Barnett cleared her throat and declared, "Now, on to our main topic, comprehensive security enhancement for Lakewood Gables." She launched into a detailed speech about how property crime was on the rise regionally, referencing vague statistics. She claimed potential burglars could exploit blind spots around the complex. Then she dropped her big reveal. "I propose we install a new set of external cameras around each building, positioned to capture all external windows and balconies. That way, if an intruder attempts to enter from a window or if suspicious activity occurs near units, we'll have footage." A hush fell. Some residents exchanged uneasy glances. Ms. Barnett pressed on, adding that we must ensure no area is left uncovered, especially where criminals might hide. She insisted it was purely for safety, though the idea of cameras aimed at windows felt deeply invasive. One woman timidly raised her hand. "But wouldn't that mean the cameras are essentially looking into our homes if the curtains are open?" Ms. Barnett gave a dismissive wave. "Only from the outside," she said, "and we trust residents to keep curtains or blinds closed if they desire privacy. Security overrides minor inconveniences." People whispered, tension rising. Ms. Barnett assured them it was still a proposal, and the board would decide soon. But the message was clear. She wanted those cameras up, no matter the intrusion. Following the meeting, the hallway buzzed with alarm. Some neighbors supported Ms. Barnett's stance, saying they'd do anything to deter burglars. But many, like me, were appalled. Cameras aimed directly at windows? Even if the footage was recorded by the HOA, it felt like a potential violation of our privacy rights. A neighbor named Julie, living on the first floor, was especially upset. She told me, "My living room windows face the courtyard. If they put a camera across the way, it'll see into my home whenever I open the curtains. That's invasive." Another neighbor, Trevor, griped that Ms. Barnett already spied on people walking their dogs or kids playing. "Now she'll have literal cameras to watch our every move," he muttered. We formed a small group to discuss how to push back. The board vote was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Ms. Barnett was rallying her supporters with fear-based talking points about lurking criminals. We needed a strategy to show the board that our privacy mattered. An older resident, Louise, pointed out that Ms. Barnett had tried strong-arm tactics before, securing majority board votes by claiming she had anonymous complaints. The only way to stop her was to unify residents who opposed the measure. But it was tough. Some believed we needed more security. Nonetheless, the seeds of resistance were planted. We vowed to gather as many like-minded neighbors as possible, attend the next meeting, and demand a less invasive security plan. In the days that followed, Ms. Barnett saturated the building with flyers about alleged break-in attempts in neighboring communities. She insisted Lakewood Gables risked being targeted next. Most of these stories were unverified or from vague sources. People grew anxious, uncertain. Some residents wavered. Maybe we do need thorough camera coverage? Meanwhile, a friend recommended we consult an attorney about the legality of cameras pointed at private windows. The attorney, after a quick assessment, said it was a gray area. HOAs can place cameras in communal areas, but intentionally recording inside private spaces can violate privacy laws, depending on state regulations. If the cameras were angled at windows specifically, that might be considered over the line. We also tried to gauge how each board member felt. We discovered Ms. Barnett essentially dominated the group. 2 members often followed her lead, rarely opposing her. Another member, Ms. Crane, seemed uncomfortable with the camera plan, but she was overshadowed by Ms. Barnett's forceful style. our best bet: rally enough residents to show overwhelming disapproval. If the board sensed huge backlash, they might refuse Ms. Barnett's measure. One late evening, a small group of neighbors gathered in my unit to brainstorm. We recognized that simple arguments about privacy or legal concerns might not sway Ms. Barnett's supporters. She was painting a doomsday scenario of criminals lurking in every shadow. We needed a more dramatic statement. That's when Trevor, an art major in college, jokingly said, "Wouldn't it be hilarious if we turned the tables on Karen? Like if she wants to watch us, maybe we show her how weird that is." We all chuckled, but it sparked an idea. We could stage a visual protest that simultaneously pointed out how intrusive these cameras would be. Julie had a eureka moment. We could hang something outside our windows, some kind of sign or sheet, that sends a clear message we don't approve of being watched. Trevor suggested printing Ms. Barnett's face in a cartoon style. He even offered to sketch a silly, peering through binoculars caricature. The group loved it, though it felt risky mocking Ms. Barnett so openly. But we were tired of her intimidation. A comedic approach might unify neighbors and grab attention. We decided on large white sheets draped inside each window, featuring Trevor's cartoon of Ms. Barnett, Karen, with binoculars. A speech bubble might read, "I'm watching you," or something ironically comedic. It would highlight the absurdity of cameras pointed at our windows. If multiple units did this, the entire building would send a loud, cheeky message that Ms. Barnett's plan was unacceptable. Trevor worked tirelessly on the cartoon design. A caricature of Ms. Barnett with her hair neatly cropped, eyebrows exaggerated in a stern arch, eyes bulging through oversized binoculars. The expression was simultaneously comedic and instantly recognizable to anyone who'd encountered Ms. Barnett's watchful presence. We arranged to have the image digitized and printed on large sheets or fabric panels that could be hung inside windows. Each design measured around 4 feet by 3 feet, big enough to be visible from outside. We pooled money to cover printing costs. The local print shop, run by a sympathetic manager, found it amusing and gave us a slight discount. We kept the plan secret from Ms. Barnett, wanting to unveil it once. But we quietly reached out to neighbors, encouraging them to hang a protest sheet in solidarity. Some were hesitant, fearing retaliation or fines. Others were eager to stand up, frustrated by Ms. Barnett's overreach. Over half the building's residents, particularly those in direct camera lines, agreed to do it. That was enough to create a spectacle. We scheduled installation day for the weekend before the board vote. The timing was perfect, giving Ms. Barnett minimal chance to sabotage the protest. Each participant was ready with pushpins or tape to secure the sheet from inside. We only prayed Ms. Barnett wouldn't catch wind too early. Finally, installation day arrived, a bright Saturday morning. One by one, from the first floor up to the 5th, neighbors tacked or taped their caricature sheets in their window interiors. Some used leftover holiday lights to highlight it from behind. Others pinned witty speech bubbles like "Smile, Karen," or "Privacy, Please," or hashtag "No Peeping." By noon, a surreal sight greeted anyone who stepped into the courtyard. Row upon row of Ms. Barnett's cartoon face, peering through binoculars, displayed in countless windows. The effect was both hilarious and eerie, like an army of comedic mini-Karens staring outward. People passing by stopped to gawk. Some residents who hadn't joined initially found it so amusing, they asked for extra prints. By evening, nearly 3/4 of the units had a comedic Karen in the window. The protest quickly gained attention. Word spread among neighbors in adjacent buildings, and a few posted photos on social media with captions like, "Our HOA wants cameras in our windows, so we gave them a taste of their own medicine." The next day, I saw tweets and Facebook posts from people praising the creative pushback. But the biggest question, how would Ms. Barnett react? Ms. Barnett found out soon enough. That Saturday evening, she returned from errands to see entire blocks of windows plastered with her caricature. Witnesses said her face turned beet red as she stormed the courtyard, jaw clenched, her usual composure shattered. She demanded that the offensive signage be removed immediately, calling it defamation and vandalism. But residents reminded her the sheets were hung inside our private windows. No HOA rule forbade it. She threatened fines for unauthorized banners. However, the bylaws only regulated external decorations on balconies or building exteriors. The inside of our windows was our personal domain. She was livid. Ms. Barnett tried to corner me in the hallway. "You orchestrated this nonsense, didn't you?" I played innocent. I simply exercised my right to free expression in my own window. Fuming, she called an emergency board meeting for Monday, presumably hoping to pass an immediate rule banning such displays. But the comita protest had already done its job, igniting a wave of neighbor solidarity. Even some who initially supported more cameras saw Ms. Barnett's meltdown and realized her approach was extreme. The building buzzed with a sense of rebellious glee. Ms. Barnett tried removing one sheet from a vacant unit. She had a spare key for emergencies, but once neighbors discovered it, they replaced it with two more. The hallway gossip was that Ms. Barnett felt humiliated, her authority undermined by a flood of cartoon faces. Monday arrived with tension thick in the air. The emergency meeting took place in the lounge, jam-packed with residents and the entire board. Ms. Barnett took the center seat, tight-lipped. On the agenda was discussion of indecent or disruptive window displays and security camera expansion. She wasted no time launching into a tirade. "The HOA cannot tolerate these insulting images of me or anyone displayed so publicly. It undermines the decorum of Lakewood Gables and sets a terrible precedent. We must impose immediate restrictions on window signage or face chaos." She claimed that the caricatures were offensive, damaging property values, and that the real issue, improving security, was overshadowed by childish pranks. Many residents bristled, calling out that Ms. Barnett's camera plan was the real invasion. We demanded to know why she insisted on pointing cameras at windows. Ms. Barnett repeated her fear-mongering about criminals sneaking in, ignoring the fact that not one burglary had occurred in years. A board member, Ms. Crane, timidly expressed doubt. "But do we have legal grounds for cameras aimed at private windows?" Our attorney recommended caution. Ms. Barnett dismissed the concern, claiming the ends justify the means. Another board member, Mr. Nelson, coughed uncomfortably. Next came public comments. One by one, residents stood to speak. Trevor called Ms. Barnett's plan Orwellian. Julie recounted how it felt to have her living room subject to potential surveillance. A father of two kids explained that cameras pointing at bedroom windows was deeply unsettling. Applause frequently erupted as people insisted privacy shouldn't be sacrificed for a non-existent threat. Finally, Ms. Barnett demanded a vote. First, to ban inappropriate window displays like the caricature, and second, to approve the new camera installations. She seemed certain she could muster enough board support, as she typically did. But the tide had turned. When Ms. Barnett called the board to vote on banning our caricature sheets, Ms. Crane announced that she'd privately consulted the HOA's legal counsel. The lawyer confirmed that, absent a bylaw addressing signs inside one's windows, punishing or banning them would be legally dubious. "We risk lawsuits if we try to penalize residents for something that's on their personal property and not specifically disallowed," Ms. Crane explained. That news shook Ms. Barnett. She glared at Ms. Crane, but Ms. Crane, emboldened by the crowd, stood firm. Another board member, Mr. Nelson, also refused to support Ms. Barnett's immediate ban, citing First Amendment concerns if the sign was inside the unit. Ms. Barnett was outnumbered. The motion to ban the caricature sheets failed. Next came the crucial camera vote. Ms. Barnett laid out her plan. An external ring of cameras around each building, angled upward to capture windows and balconies. She insisted it was non-negotiable for security. But the crowd's strong objections and the fiasco with the caricature had changed the board's mood. Ms. Crane and Mr. Nelson said they'd only approve cameras in communal hallways, entrances, and parking lots, not pointed at private windows. Seeing the board's growing hesitation, Ms. Barnett tried a last-ditch emotional appeal, ranting about hypothetical home invasions and referencing sensational crime news. But the room was unmoved. The final vote? The board approved a narrower, revised plan to upgrade existing hallway and parking lot cameras only, explicitly prohibiting cameras aimed at windows or balconies. Ms. Barnett's comprehensive vantage concept was rejected. The lounge erupted in applause. Ms. Barnett sat rigid, her lips pressed thin, humiliated. People shook hands, congratulating each other. Our comedic protest had worked. The board recognized that Ms. Barnett's plan was invasive, and the wave of resident opposition was too powerful to ignore. In the days after the meeting, the mood around Lakewood Gables was jubilant. The white sheets with Ms. Barnett's cartoon face remained up, at least for a while, like a victory banner. Some residents eventually took them down, but others left them as a tongue-in-cheek reminder that we'd thwarted Ms. Barnett's overreach. Ms. Barnett herself seemed to vanish from public view. She no longer roamed the halls with her notebook. Rumors flew that she was fuming behind closed doors, planning some new angle. A couple of her staunch supporters complained we'd been too harsh, but they were a minority. The majority felt Ms. Barnett had overstepped in a big way. The board set about implementing the scaled-back camera upgrade, hiring a reputable security firm to replace outdated hallway cams, ensuring footage was stored safely, clarifying privacy guidelines. The firm consulted the board about angles, fields of view, etc., making sure no lens inadvertently pointed into private windows. This open, professional approach reassured residents that we'd have improved safety without Ms. Barnett's invasive scheme. However, Ms. Barnett wasn't one to slink away quietly. She tried petty methods to harass the protesters. A few neighbors who displayed the caricature sheets received random notices about violations, like one complaining that their doormat was an unapproved color, another about alleged trash bin infractions. It was transparent retaliation. We responded calmly, citing that the doormat color was well within accepted hues, or that the trash bins were placed on the correct days. Each time, Ms. Barnett's complaint fizzled under scrutiny. The board, still stung by her fiasco, was less inclined to rubber stamp her punitive claims. Ms. Barnett found herself isolated. Even her closest ally on the board, Mr. Stevens, distanced himself, not wanting to share blame for the fiasco. Some residents joked that Ms. Barnett might set up hidden cameras on her own, but we doubted she'd risk something so blatantly illegal. The newly installed official cameras, managed by the security firm, had strict oversight by the board. Ms. Barnett's total control ended, replaced by checks and balances. One positive outcome of the protest was a newfound camaraderie among neighbors. People who barely spoke before joined forces to defend their privacy. We organized small gatherings in the courtyard, discussing ways to keep the building safe without intruding on personal space. Ms. Crane, the newly influential board member, suggested a community watch approach, residents voluntarily looking out for each other, exchanging phone numbers for emergencies. The comedic sheets featuring Ms. Barnett's caricature remained a hot conversation piece. Some neighbors got creative, adding comedic speech bubbles that changed weekly. Karen still watching, or privacy over fear. While the protest started as frustration, it evolved into a playful symbol of unity. A local blogger got wind of our story. Condo residents troll overbearing HOA chair with her own cartoon face and posted photos of the windows. The post went semi-viral, receiving supportive comments from around the country. People praised our humor in resisting an overly intrusive policy. Ms. Barnett was mortified by the publicity, no doubt. After weeks of relative silence, Ms. Barnett attempted to salvage her reputation. She authored a long email to all residents, apologizing if my security measures were misinterpreted, but doubling down on the claim that danger is real and Lakewood Gables must remain vigilant. She insisted her intention was never to spy on anyone, just to protect us. Few residents bought it. We recognized the apology as half-hearted. She still refused to acknowledge how cameras aimed at windows blatantly invaded privacy. Some neighbors responded politely, stating we'd prefer an approach that respected boundaries. Ms. Barnett's attempts to regain moral high ground largely fell flat. Then a bizarre rumor emerged. Ms. Barnett had considered running for a local council seat, possibly using Lakewood Gables as her platform. The fiasco with the cameras apparently tarnished that ambition. People joked that she'd wanted a campaign talking point about tough on crime, but ended up looking like Big Brother. If true, that might explain her desperation. During this period, a quiet man named Harold approached me in the lobby, revealing he was Ms. Barnett's cousin. He admitted that while they weren't close, he knew how controlling she could be. He apologized for her behavior, explaining that she'd grown up in a family that prized order and discipline to an extreme degree. Harold told me Ms. Barnett's father had been a strict policeman, instilling a deep fear of crime in her. She sees threats everywhere, Harold said softly. That doesn't excuse her methods, but maybe it explains her obsession with security. I listened, feeling a twinge of sympathy. It didn't justify invasive cameras, but it shed light on Ms. Barnett's mindset. Harold said he was relieved the community had pushed back. She might never learn if everyone always caves to her. Maybe this will help her realize lines exist that she shouldn't cross, he mused. It was an interesting perspective. I appreciated Harold's candor. I doubted Ms. Barnett would publicly show any vulnerability. Still, perhaps this fiasco would eventually humble her, or at least curb her impulses. As the new camera system, covering hallways and common areas only, went live, life at Lakewood Gables settled into a tranquil routine. The comedic protest gradually wound down. Some neighbors took down the caricature sheets once they felt assured Ms. Barnett's plan was dead. Others kept them up as whimsical decor or comedic solidarity. Mornings found me sipping coffee on my balcony again, this time with no fear that a camera might be staring back. The knowledge that we collectively averted something so invasive felt empowering. Ms. Crane's revised approach to security, focusing on the real high-traffic areas, didn't hamper our privacy. Break-ins remained non-existent. It turned out Lakewood Gables was safe all along, further undermining Ms. Barnett's fear-based logic. Community events flourished. The board sponsored a lake cleanup day and a summer barbecue. With Ms. Barnett sidelined, the atmosphere was lighter. She still attended board meetings, but rarely tried to push sweeping changes. She knew the comedic protest had tarnished her standing, and the board wouldn't easily yield to her again. One evening, while checking my mail, I encountered Ms. Barnett in the foyer. We hadn't spoken directly since the protest began. She stood rigidly near the bulletin board, scanning updated announcements. She turned, catching sight of me. For a moment, I expected a snide remark or a cold silence. Instead, she gave a measured sigh. All that nonsense with the caricatures. I suppose you thought it was quite clever. I met her gaze. I don't regret protesting cameras aimed at our windows. We respect security, but not at the cost of personal privacy. She pursed her lips. You have no idea the responsibilities I carry, ensuring everyone's safety. Then you mock me. It was humiliating. A pang of guilt stirred, but I reminded myself of the principle. We tried talking at the meeting. You refused to compromise. The protest was a last resort. If you felt humiliated, maybe consider the humiliation of having cameras peering into our living rooms. We locked eyes, tension simmering. Finally, Ms. Barnett exhaled, looking away. It's done. The board made its decision. I trust you're satisfied. It's for the best, I replied. Maybe going forward, we can find more balanced solutions together, ones that respect everyone's privacy. She didn't respond, but I sensed a flicker of resignation. With that, she turned on her heel and walked out. It wasn't exactly a reconciliation, but at least it ended without shouting or threats. Perhaps that was the closest we'd get to burying the hatchet. A few months passed, and Lakewood Gables thrived under the new, less intrusive security system. The board, led in part by Ms. Crane, listened more attentively to resident concerns. People felt safer in a genuine sense, knowing the hallways and parking lots were monitored, not their private spaces. Our comedic protest had proven that pushing back against an overbearing neighbor could yield results without fracturing the community. Ms. Barnett kept her seat on the board, though rumors circulated she might not run for re-election next term. Many speculated she realized her tough on crime approach lost favor after the fiasco. Meanwhile, neighbors who had once been strangers now greeted each other warmly, recalling how we banded together. Trevor sometimes joked about printing new Karen sheets for upcoming April Fool's Day, just to keep Ms. Barnett on her toes. I often reflected on that weekend when we revealed the caricature protest. The sight of dozens of Ms. Barnett's cartoon faces in the windows was simultaneously hilarious and powerful, an image of comedic defiance that spread far beyond our complex. It taught us the power of unity, creativity, and humor in resisting an unjust measure. Eventually, Ms. Barnett stepped down from the board a year later, citing personal commitments. Some believe she was tired of the scrutiny, or perhaps chasing another ambition. While she never apologized publicly for the camera scheme, her influence waned. Lakewood Gables continued on, welcoming new residents who heard rumors of the infamous window cam fiasco. Trevor, the mastermind behind the caricature, became a local legend among us, credited with sparking the creative idea that rallied neighbors. He joked about turning it into a short documentary, though we never did. Still, references to the Karen sheets popped up whenever the HOA discussed any new policy. We can solve this the easy way or the sheet way, people teased. Thus, Ms. Barnett's departure marked the end of a tense era. No longer overshadowed by her brand of hypersecurity, Lakewood Gables found a more relaxed equilibrium. We had standard cameras in legitimate areas, no Big Brother fiasco, and a renewed sense of community pride. In the end, the story of how we draped our windows with Ms. Barnett's binocular cartoon face became a cherished piece of Lakewood Gables lore. Newcomers would see old photos or hear retellings from longtime residents. Once upon a time, Karen tried to spy on our windows, so we turned the tables and put her face in them instead. It always earned laughs. Yet beyond the humor lay a deeper lesson. Standing up for one's privacy and dignity can be done peacefully, creatively, and collectively. No single voice could have stopped Ms. Barnett's intrusive plan, but joined together, we shaped a different outcome. The sheets served as more than comedic protest. They symbolized the line we drew between public security and private sanctuary. Today, I still live in Unit 502, sipping coffee on my balcony, gazing at the tranquil lake. The neighborly bonds forged during that crisis endure. If a new issue arises, be it minor or major, the sense of unity lingers. We know we can rely on each other to speak out, to compromise, or to protest if needed. Ms. Barnett's unwise camera plan ironically taught us the value of shared sense of community watch that doesn't trespass boundaries. And so the story ends on a happy note. Lakewood Gables remains safe without prying cameras aimed at windows. Ms. Barnett's nosy ambitions stifled by a comedic wave of white sheets bearing her cartoon face. In the aftermath, we discovered that humor, solidarity, and a firm stand for personal privacy can dismantle even the most overreaching Karen, proving that sometimes a bit of laughter is mightier than fear.